Yes. Yeah. And there is a wonderful little thing that came all in one fell swoop when I was writing this book. Life is set up to bring up what has been bound up so it can open up to be freed up so we can show up for life. Now, to really understand that, we need to know, and this is why the meadow metaphor is so powerful, our natural state is free-flowing aliveness, just like when a baby was young. Happiness, sadness, madness, gladness, they all dance through the babe. There wasn't anything inside of them that held on. Then we started creating what I call the storyteller in our heads. That is this, creates this self-image, and the key word is image, because image is not the real thing. And we crawl into this storyteller in our head, which then separates us from life. And we learn how to tighten our bodies. We learn how to resist the feelings that were so big inside of us that we didn't know what to do with them, so we learned how to hold our breath and run away to our heads. Well, those feelings don't go away. They're trapped energy inside of us. And we keep on trying to run away from it. And it's like, I was trained in backpacking. If you come across a bear in the woods, don't run away because the bear will run after you. But we were trained to run away from our loneliness, our sadness, our shame, our fear, our terror, our not enoughness, our irritation, our anger. And because of that, we stay stuck to this stuff like glue. Now, that tightens up this flow of energy, and we're cut off from life. So life is inviting us back into the flow by putting us in the situations to help us to see how we tighten. What are the states that we tighten down around? What are the states we try to get away from? And oftentimes it takes something like, I call it the yellow highlighter of life, when life gives you a couple of things right in a row, a breakup and a death, a sudden death. And this wakes up all of this stuff that got bound up inside of us. And my job is to make you curious. So let's take, for example, that I knew dread. Dread is that feeling of something really bad is going to happen. It's going to happen because I did something wrong. And I once gained 97 pounds in a year to try to get away from it. I washed all that stuff down with alcohol. I took every drug I could get my hands on, and when that didn't work, I tried to kill myself 3 times. All trying to get away from dread. And then I was taught how to be curious. It took a while to discover how to be curious so that I wasn't gobbled up by the states. But as soon as I could learn how to be with dread, that tightness just passed through me. It didn't need to be fixed. It didn't need to be gotten rid of. It didn't even need to be understood. My goodness, I did just thousands of years of therapy. It just needed to be touched through the light of my attention.
Well, Mary, I feel like it's a good time to talk about the spells, because I think that dread and those negative feelings, they all come up because of these fundamental beliefs that we hold.
Yeah, and I'm glad you said beliefs, because that's really what they are. But I like the word spells even better, because number one, it kind of captures your attention. And number two, a spell is something that's not true. It's laid over the top of you, and it can be lifted. And most of what we think of as ourselves are spells. These beliefs in that life is not safe, and I'm separate, and I have to control it, and if I'm not controlling it good enough, so there's something wrong with me. And there's 8 core spells, and I've had the wonderful grace of seeing inside of the minds and hearts of tens and thousands of people in the last 30 years. And these spells came out of that work to see that we all carry these spells. And freedom comes when you recognize that they are spells and begin to be able to see them. Like for me, when dread was operating, I began to be able to go, no, wait, what's here? Who's here? And bring my attention towards it and be curious about it.
So can we talk a little bit more about these spells? Because I feel like especially the hidden spells.
Right.
Number one, I think a lot of us are not aware of them. And then when we become aware of them, we think we're alone in that.
Oh, so true. I have had the good grace to hang out with a man called Stephen Levine. He's not teaching anymore, but he wrote many books on death and dying, but he really wrote books about how to be fully alive and live from the heart. And he said at one time, I'm going to create a hat, and when you put it on your head, it's going to instantaneously broadcast over a loudspeaker all of your thoughts. And there was about 200 people in the room, and there was this collective groan, and he said something along this line that, no, you would know so much freedom because you would discover that we're all caught in the same place. And I think the other thing before we start talking about the spells is that the word personality, its root word it's persona, and it means mask. So most of us have learned how to be human doings rather than human beings. We have learned how to be what we think we should be, and we're cut off from our natural aliveness, our joy, our authenticity. And to begin to see how that happened and to see it with great compassion is how these spells are lifted. So the first spell that we all take on is, I am separate from life. And nothing could be further from the truth. You know, in my retreats, I do retreats in beautiful tropical places like Costa Rica and Hawaii, and I do a food meditation, and at the end of the food meditation, most people just have their mind absolutely blown because they see that that's not a strawberry they're holding in their hand. It took the whole universe in order to make it. And so we are at one with this dynamic, alive, intelligent flow of life, but we think that we are separate from it. And that's our homesickness. That is our homesickness. We long to come home to the flow of life, to have our belly soft, our heart open, and our attention engaged with life the moment it appears out of mystery. But this veil, I am separate, and where it takes you cuts us off from that. And so the second spell that it takes us to is life is not safe. Because when you're separate, you see that, oh my God, it includes loss and pain and death and so on and so forth. None of those are what they look like on the surface, but that's a whole other, conversation. But to really understand that we believe that life is not safe, I am here to say it is a benevolent, loving process, and it is love. And yes, it does include pain, loss, and death, but that doesn't take away the truth. That is the safest thing you'll ever do is come back into the flow of life. So those are the two core spells. Then they lead us to the three operating spells. I've got to do life. In other words, I've got to control it. And I've got to do it right. And I'm not doing it right enough or good enough. And that's where most people live, thinking that
Yep.
is themselves. They constantly are, let's just take our hair, for heaven's sakes. We have too much or too little, or it's too curly or it's too straight, or it's too gray or it's too blonde, or it's too, I don't know, everything. And so it's a very good window into how much we are constantly trying to do life, to be what we think we should be, and do it right. And then secretly believing we're not doing it right enough. So then we pick ourselves back up again. Now I got to do it. I got to do it right. Another place you can see these three operating spells are in weight loss. And that whole industry that is such a creates such heartache, in the world. So then we live those three operating spells long enough, and life doesn't show up in the way that we think it should show up. And it brings closer to the surface the three hidden spells that we all carry. And the first is, because I'm not doing it right, I am wrong. Or even I am bad. And everybody has this. Everybody has visits, attacks from this deep belief that not only am I not doing it right, but I am not right. Then that leads to the second hidden spell. Because I am bad and wrong, I am unlovable. And this is one of the greatest heartaches that human beings carry. It's so amazing because we are made out of love. We are breathed by love. We drink love as water. The sun loves us. We live in a sea of love, and we do not see it because we have taken on these spells. And the more we take on these spells, it leads us to the last spell, which is a spell that I lived in for a long, long, long time. And that is, I am all alone. And most people would say they don't have the three hidden spells unless they're woken up in the middle of the night after a breakup, or they screwed up a major project at work, or they were in an automobile accident, or their loved one got sick, or maybe they're sick. And that opens the door to these hidden spells, and they can beat us up in the middle of the night, and then we wrestle them to the ground, but they don't go away. They're there influencing us from underneath our everyday awareness. The amazing thing, Marie, if you take that main word of the eighth core spell, where all of these spells lead us to, I am all alone, and you separate that word out, it's all one. That's the truth. Go back to the meadow metaphor. You've never left the meadow. You just have been trained to pay attention to these clouds of spells that whirl and swirl around you. And that's our heartache. We can't get back to the meadow because we're already there. Our job is to discover how to see these spells as they operate inside of us, and see them with great mercy, kindness, and compassion. That is what heals.
Wow. Mary, when you were sharing that about being in the meadow, that we've always been in the meadow, we just can't see it, it reminded me of animals that they've done tests on, and elephants. They'll have an elephant on a big chain, and he'll try and get away. And then after so long, he'll stop trying, and then they'll just have him on a little chain, and he never tries to get away again, because his belief is it's hopeless. I'll never get away, so he doesn't even try.
Yes. And that's why I tried to kill myself 3 times. Helpless, hopeless, despair. But then a few years later, life showed me how to be curious. And then a few years after that, through Stephen Levine, I learned how to be curious with great, great kindness, because in those years before I met Stephen, I was curious, but there was still a lot of revulsion, hatred, and shame for the depth, for the spells, and for the depth that I had these spells. And then I learned how to be kind with the spells.
Can you say more about that? So do you mean be kind even though you're having these thoughts? Or
Yes. Yep. You'll be amazed if you start being curious and watching what goes through your mind all day long. Let's take self-judgment. It is astounding how cruel we can be with ourselves. And then we judge other people, and we judge ourselves for judging other people, not understanding that judging other people is like a safety release valve, like on a pressure cooker, for all of the self-judgment that we have taken on in our lives. I love to say that mine metaphorically went to law school and graduated top in its class and was president of the debate club. So it could convince me of my not only unworthiness, I'm trying to think of another word, of my total ineptness, my total brokenness, my total stupidity, I can't even get a word that's strong enough here about how much self-hate used to run my life. And then I started being curious, and I carried a notebook around with me. Is when I first started seeing this, and I said, well, I'm going to watch this judging quality of my mind. And then the judge said, well, I don't judge you. Ha ha. So then I started carrying a notebook around, and I would write down when I would catch it, judging. I was at work, and it would say something about, that my boss, surely has figured out now that I'm the most inept person around, whatever, and all this. And I would write all this down, and I brought it home and got a big, huge piece of newsprint and printed the circle, this big circle, and then in the center of it, I put a circle with a heart in it, which was the core of who we are. And then on the spokes, I put spokes in this circle, and I wrote down all of these words that I say to myself. And when I saw them out there, something happened inside of me. I began to see how scared the judger was. I began to see how young it was. So now I not only can catch it, being curious about it when it comes, I'm very alert to what happens in my body when the judger comes. And it can still come at times. But very quickly I go straight into curiosity and say, hi, sweetheart, you're having a bad day, aren't you? And I hope you can hear in that sense that I'm not believing in its story. I'm not running away from it. I am turning towards it. I'm saying hello, and I'm touching it with my heart. And it was Carl Jung that said that, we're a community in there. We've got all these different parts, and each one of them have a different view of the world, a view that was created and frozen inside of us before we were 6. We can release them purely by seeing them and seeing them with kindness, because they're just like you and I. If you had a friend that you had a bad day and you went to talk with your friend, and your friend said, oh, Marie, you're talking about that again? Or, oh, Marie, I don't have time for you. Or, oh, Marie, I need to fix you. I need to fix you because this is not okay. How would that make you feel? But if that friend listened to you and you could feel there was no judgment in that listening, there was just an intent to really meet you right where you are, in a matter of minutes, you would start feeling better. Not because she said anything, not because she's fixed anything, but because her attention, her judgmental attention was there. And that's what these parts want to heal, whether it's your angry part, oh my God, we just give anger such a bad rap, or it's the lonely one, or it's the despairing one, or the irritated one, or the arrogant one, or the ashamed one, or the scared one. They all are longing to be seen and heard, just like we long to be seen and heard.